There's a peculiar kind of loneliness that comes from being treated like an ATM rather than a son. For years, I've been the invisible backbone of my family, a source of financial support they tap into whenever it suits them, but otherwise ignore. They call me only when the rent is overdue, when bills pile up, or when one of their grand plans falls apart. And every time I answer, "Send the money," and tell myself it's what families do. But deep down, resentment has festered, growing heavier with each transaction. So when they called again last month, begging for yet another bailout, I decided it was time to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. It all started after college, when I landed my first real job. I wasn't earning much, just enough to scrape by. But compared to my parents and siblings, I might as well have been rolling in wealth. My father had always struggled to hold down steady work, bouncing between odd jobs and half-hearted business ventures that inevitably failed. My mother worked tirelessly at a diner, her hands perpetually cracked and raw from hours spent washing dishes. And then there was my younger brother Marcus, whose charm masked a streak of reckless ambition. He dreamed big, but executed poorly, leaving a trail of unpaid debts and broken promises in his wake. At first, helping them felt natural. After all, we were family. When Dad needed car repairs to get to work, I sent him cash without hesitation. When Mom mentioned she couldn't afford new shoes for winter, I bought her a pair. And when Marcus pitched his latest can't-miss idea, a food truck concept he swore would revolutionize street dining, I handed over the seed money, believing in him despite the odds. Each request came wrapped in gratitude, accompanied by promises that this would be the last time. But those promises were empty, and the calls kept coming. Over time, the pattern became clear. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a solution to their problems. Birthdays passed unacknowledged unless they coincided with a funding plea. Holidays were marked not by warmth or connection, but by thinly veiled requests for help. Even milestones like promotions or personal achievements went unnoticed unless they could somehow benefit from them. The imbalance gnawed at me, but guilt kept me tethered to their demands. Who was I to turn my back on my own family? That changed 6 months ago when Marcus called late one night, his voice trembling with desperation. "I'm in trouble," he admitted, skipping the usual pleasantries. "There's this guy. He says if I don't pay him back by Friday, things are going to get bad." "What did you do now?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "It's complicated," he hedged, avoiding specifics. "But I need $5,000. You're the only one who can help." $5,000. The number echoed in my head, absurd and infuriating. This wasn't the first time Marcus had borrowed money under dubious circumstances, nor would it be the last. Yet here he was, expecting me to swoop in and save him once again. I wanted to say no, to finally draw a line in the sand and refuse to enable his recklessness. But old habits die hard, and before I knew it, I found myself transferring the funds, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. The breaking point came weeks later, when my father called with yet another request. His tone was casual, almost nonchalant, as though asking for money was as routine as checking the weather. "We're thinking of moving," he announced. "Found a place near the lake. It's beautiful, but the deposit's steep. Thought maybe you could lend a hand." "A lake house?" I repeated, incredulous. "You want me to fund your vacation home while I'm still paying off student loans?" "It's an investment," he countered quickly, sensing my resistance. "Once we fix it up, we can rent it out, make some extra cash." "Extra cash," I muttered, shaking my head. "And what happens when the next emergency pops up? Will you come running to me again?" Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, he sighed. "Look, son, we wouldn't ask if we didn't need it. You know how tough things have been." Tough things. That phrase haunted me long after the call ended. Yes, life had been hard for them, but hadn't it been hard for me too? Didn't I deserve more than to be treated as a walking bank account? Anger simmered beneath the surface, boiling over until I made a decision. The next time they called, I wouldn't give them money. Instead, I'd give them a reality check they'd never forget. When the inevitable call came, a month later, predictably from Marcus, I answered with a calmness that surprised even myself. "Hey, bro," he began, his voice already tinged with urgency. "I hate to bother you, but—" "No," I interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Not this time." "What do you mean, not this time?" he asked, confusion creeping into his tone. "I mean, no," I repeated firmly. "No money, no excuses, no bailouts. From now on, you're on your own." "You're kidding, right?" he shot back, his voice rising. "This is serious, Leo. If I don't pay this guy back, he's going to—" "I don't care," I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. "Figure it out. Borrow from someone else. Sell something. Do whatever you have to, but leave me out of it." The line went silent for a moment before Marcus exploded. "You're unbelievable, after everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed bitterly. "Name one thing, just one, because all I remember is handing over my paycheck while you live recklessly and expect me to clean up your messes." He hung up without another word, but the fallout didn't stop there. Over the next few days, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from my parents, each message more desperate than the last. At first, they pleaded, appealing to my sense of duty and familial loyalty. When that failed, they turned accusatory, blaming me for abandoning them in their hour of need. Through it all, I remained steadfast, refusing to budge. What happened next caught me off guard. Without my financial safety net, cracks began to form in their carefully constructed facades. Marcus scrambled to find legitimate work, taking on odd jobs and learning the value of consistency for the first time. My father swallowed his pride and applied for government assistance, attending workshops to improve his skills. And my mother, ever resourceful, started selling homemade baked goods at local markets, slowly building a small customer base. Months passed, and though tensions remained high, something shifted. For the first time in years, our conversations weren't centered around money. Instead, they shared stories of their struggles and triumphs, however small. Marcus proudly told me about landing a stable job at a warehouse. My father spoke of completing a carpentry course, his voice filled with genuine excitement. And my mother beamed as she described expanding her baking business, dreaming of opening a small storefront someday. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was progress. Slowly, painfully, we began rebuilding our relationship, brick by fragile brick. Forgiveness didn't come easily, but neither did change. Watching them take responsibility for their lives reminded me of why I stayed tethered to them for so long, because beneath the dysfunction, there was still love. Flawed, complicated, and messy, but love nonetheless. Looking back now, I realized that saying no wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was about forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions. By stepping back, I gave them the space to grow, to stumble, and ultimately to rise. Life doesn't offer easy answers, and forgiveness isn't a switch you flip overnight. But sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest transformations. In the end, they didn't just learn a lesson, they gave me one too. About resilience, about letting go, and about finding strength in vulnerability. And while scars remain, they serve as reminders not of pain, but of growth.